All right, Danny, you've, on the defense side, you know this stuff targeting really well. How often, what's the timeline from being told you had a client was a target to the indictment itself most of the time? What's the average length of waiting period there?
First, the significance of being identified as a target cannot be understated. Generally, there are three categories. As a defense attorney, when your client is part of an investigation, mentioned, his name uttered in an investigation, you want to find out where he fits. Is he a target? Is he a subject? Or is he a witness? And I have to tell you, Chuck, even when you are at the lowest level of culpability, a witness, you are terrified. Right. And in fact, there are many reasons to even not want your client to testify when they are merely considered a witness. Because as you can imagine, a witness can turn into a target in about 5 seconds if they say the wrong thing at a grand jury proceeding. But once you are in target land, you simply cannot cooperate. So the idea, and I've heard this reported, that Trump may have been offered the opportunity to come speak. Now that he's a target, that will never, ever happen.
You would never advise a client to do that, would you?
I barely would advise a client to do it if they're merely a witness. If you're a target, I got to tell you, Chuck, for months, maybe years now, I've had a personal embargo against saying things like, any day now, or the walls are closing in. And the reason for that is I started saying it back during the Mueller investigation, and it keeps your adrenaline at a certain level that you just can't maintain. So I realized, look, it's going to happen, if at all, when it's going to happen. But this any day now stuff, it just wasn't happening the next day or the next week. Now that we're in target land, the calculus changes, for me at least.
All right,
I now believe
target
that they're imminent.
I understand that. We're in target land, and we have an active grand jury.
Sure.
So is that, do you assume at this point the grand jury is there to hear the indictments, not to hear any more testimony?
Just because there's an active grand jury, there could be other potential targets other than Donald Trump. I held out that possibility for many months now. I mean, we had grand juries in other federal investigations that involved Donald Trump. Remember with the Mueller investigation, other people got indicted. It was always breaking news when this person or that person would be indicted. And yet, at the end of it, Trump was not. So there is that possibility.
Mark Meadows, I was just going to say, well, let's move over to the documents case, because we know Mark Meadows, I think, has had to do both.
Yes.
Given that he was the final chief of staff, it's possible that he also has criminal exposure here with the classified documents, correct?
That's possible, yes. The fact that he's testifying makes me wonder because, you know, as an attorney...
Sounds like you got advice from a lawyer to say, well, if you testify, you won't be a target.
Yeah, but see, that is the catch-22, and that's why, because grand juries are so secretive. And let me tell you something. If you haven't picked up the phone and called a U.S. attorney to try to get information about an investigation against your client, that's not a fun phone call, because they know how to have a phone call without imparting any information.
Yep.
They're mostly collecting, which, by the way, Chuck, in light of the reports that Trump's defense team met with government lawyers of Jack Smith's team, well, of course Jack Smith's team wants to do that. Why not get new information, hear what the defense has to say? You might get something juicy. So listen, I've never heard of those meetings changing the mind of prosecutors when the defense comes in and maybe makes an argument why their client shouldn't be charged. That's not to say that if you have the opportunity as a defense attorney, you shouldn't take it. Anything you can do for your client, but low success rate. By the way, everything in federal prosecution for the defense is a low success rate.
Look, we're all tea leaf reading here, and you're more familiar with the legal world. It does seem as if when I saw Fani Willis, who's the Fulton County prosecutor, she laid out a timeline of potential, we know when the courthouse might need security, and she seemed to move it to closer to the end of the summer.
Yes.
That doesn't seem like a decision that's made in isolation. The likelihood that she and either Merrick Garland are at least coordinating timing. Maybe they don't coordinate, maybe they're not sharing testimony yet, although I guess that certainly is not a no-no. Is it possible, do you think, that they're communicating on timing?
Yes, and I believe it's possible that Fani Willis is being mindful of what she understands from the federal government to be their timeline. But make no mistake about it, if the federal government feels like scrapping their timeline, whether or not that affects Fani Willis's request to shut down a courthouse, they won't care one iota. I think in that cooperation, it's really more of a one-way street. Fani Willis is more subservient to the federal government on this.
Bottom line is, you know, every assignment desk editor in America has their hair on fire, wondering, is tonight the night? Is tomorrow the day? And are people overreacting, or are we in that window?
See, Chuck, you're going to make me say it
know.
again. I
Are
have
we
a
really in the
personal
window?
embargo. Are we in the window? I just said I won't say it, but here I will. Now that
You
he's
seem
a target,
to be wanting to say it.
I want to say it, but I have made a private oath, Chuck. But I do think in light of the target information, here we go. The end is nigh, probably. It's going to be happening soon. I did it. You got me to do it, Chuck.
85 years over 6 million is a short amount of time, too, right?
Yeah.
So anyway. Danny Cevallos, thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.